Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and here is your detailed forecast update for March 13th, 2025. A lot to get through in today's forecast update, including heavy rainfall and storms expected across far north Queensland, which could amount to rainfall accumulations up to 1,000mm in the next 2 weeks. Cyclones left, right and centre for Western Australia, parts of the Northern Territory and even parts of Queensland as well now on the forecast, and stormy conditions expected over interior Western Australia. All of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast. If you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing, but let's get stuck straight into things this morning up in far north Queensland and North Queensland, where a few showers are now beginning to stream ashore, especially down into the Whitsundays area. We're seeing a couple of moderate heavy showers streaming ashore in those areas there, and coupled by some windier conditions today, the weather is expected to be rather unpleasant down there. So let's get stuck straight into the forecast for this week. Quite a bit of rainfall is expected. You can see throughout the remainder of today, not really piping up anywhere, apart from the Whitsundays, where we are expecting some moderate showers to be streaming ashore there. Nothing crazy in the way of rainfall accumulations though around the Mackay area. It's just going to be more sort of unpleasant weather. Later on tonight, we're expecting these showers to develop a little bit further north, swooping up into the Bowen area, and then later on tonight into the Townsville area, where we could be seeing falls up there later on tonight around that 25mm mark. Heavier falls also expected into the southern parts of the Cassowary Coast as well later on tonight into early tomorrow morning, expecting the showers to then begin to get quite heavy at times throughout the course of tomorrow. We will see this rainfall then by tomorrow morning sweep up into the Cassowary Coast. We could be seeing 6-hourly rainfall accumulations around the Cassowary Coast between Cairns down towards Cardwell, anywhere between nothing up to about 30mm of rainfall. Good precursor rainfall and a good sign of things to come, as you can see through Friday night, the rainfall beginning to build for the Daintree Rainforest, and then in towards Saturday morning, moderate heavy falls expected as this monsoon trough begins to build and then head further south. You can still see showers persisting around the Cassowary Coast, but the real rainfall is going to be around the Daintree Rainforest through Saturday morning and into early Saturday afternoon, where moderate to heavy falls can be expected there, and then moderate heavy falls turning much heavier on later on Saturday night into early Sunday morning can be expected around the Cassowary Coast, and this is where we're expecting a solid band of rainfall to develop Saturday night into early Sunday morning for locations between Cooktown right down to Townsville, with the heaviest bands of rainfall sweeping in from the southeast around the Cairns area down towards the Townsville area, and as such some really significant rainfall accumulations can be expected in those areas, with 6-hourly falls anywhere between 120 out to 180mm possible, and 24-hourly accumulations up to about 300mm possible for the wettest locations along the coastline, especially around Tully and South Mission Beach. And this is all to the 9am on Sunday morning. You can see as we get out towards later Sunday morning, the rainfall contracting around to the Innisfail and the Lucinda area, the Ingham and the Lucinda area, rather around not far out. My geography this morning is going to suck. Around Hinchbrook Island and the Palm Island area, you can see the rainfall contracting there. Moderate falls extending into the Townsville area later on Sunday morning and into early Sunday afternoon, and then light moderate falls expected around the Whitsundays and up the North Queensland coastline, then into the far North Queensland. Light moderate falls can be expected through Sunday afternoon and into Monday morning. You can see that rainfall actually tends a little bit heavier later on Monday morning as well into the Daintree Rainforest, kind of around for round 2, and you can see that rainfall again building heavy at times through Monday night into early Tuesday morning around the Cassowary Coast as well, which would be similar to the rainfall that we'll see Saturday night into Sunday morning, just expected to be slightly lighter. Heavy falls continuing through Tuesday as well for the southern parts of the Cassowary Coast, and then through Cardwell and Ingham we're seeing heavy falls through Tuesday afternoon, and then heavy falls Tuesday evening contracting south towards Townsville, and then it looks like the weather will dry out a little bit from that point onwards. From Wednesday morning onwards, the weather, whilst there will still be some moderate showers in the vicinity, not only is the forecast just a little bit more uncertain, but it looks like that tropical moisture will be dragged further inland, and I'll get to the reasons why. In the Gulf of Carpentaria through Wednesday and Thursday, we dragged a little bit further off towards the west, and as such rainfall is not expected to be as heavy as across far north Queensland, but still that rainfall is going to be there. It's going to be the showers and storms being pretty persistent through Wednesday and Thursday as well. The rainfall still will continue, and through Friday we might be seeing some heavier falls in the morning as well, and then later on into the forecast period as well, if we check other forecast models with the GFS expecting the development of tropical lows or tropical cyclones in the Gulf of Carpentaria much later on into the forecast period. Moderate heavy rainfall will continue across far north Queensland into the last week of March as well. But yeah, to recap that, certainly some heavy falls expected through Saturday night into Sunday morning, and then heavy falls again Monday night into Tuesday morning, and we could be seeing rainfall accumulations over the next 5 days amount to something pretty serious across this part of Queensland, up to about that 500mm mark. And you can see from the Access forecast alone some significant falls expected over the next 5 days, or of this the next 6 days, actually some pretty significant falls, but I'll get to that in a later part of the video. And again, with all of that being driven by the tropical on the Gulf of Carpentaria that hasn't actually formed yet, again I'll talk about that in just a few moments, but that tropical low in the Gulf of Carpentaria, a lot is depending on where that moves, and that's why the rainfall forecast still a little bit uncertain right now for this part of North Queensland, but we can definitely say for sure that some heavier falls are expected through Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and some heavier falls also possible through Monday and Tuesday as well across the far North Queensland's Cassowary Coast. So we know that that's for certain at this point, but we don't know the exact timing at this point. I think this rainfall event is going to end up being kind of take it as a day-by-day type thing, especially as we get later on into next week. So the definitive answers aren't going to be around for quite a while, but yeah, we can really say for sure what we're expecting throughout the course of this weekend. That's for sure. So yeah, certainly an interesting weather event, that's for sure. The rainfall that we've got out throughout the remainder of this week is very much set in stone at this time, and you can see between the major forecast models in great congruence with what rainfall we are expecting as well. And I think it goes without saying as well that this rainfall isn't just concentrated to far north Queensland, it's actually going to extend down the far north Queensland coastline as well. So let's break down those numbers for these locations place by place, starting in the north and heading south as we normally do. So as far north as Cooktown, we're expecting significant rainfall accumulations throughout the next 2 weeks, up to about 300 millimetres or so. The majority of the rainfall up to around the Cooktown area, like I said, will be coming through on Saturday and Sunday, where we could be seeing about 200 millimetres actually in a 24-hour period through Saturday and Sunday as well, depending on what showers or rain bands develop in those areas. Into the Daintree Rainforest, so outside of Port Douglas and the Wudgel area in there around the Daintree village, we could be seeing rainfall accumulations over the next 2 weeks up to about 500 millimetres, again with the majority of that rainfall coming through on Saturday, but then another burst of that rainfall coming through later on into the forecast period through Thursday, Friday and Saturday, the 20th out to about the 22nd or the 23rd of March respectively. Further south, Cairns, just considering its more protected location here, depending on how this rainfall comes in, there will be some good falls Saturday night into Sunday morning around Cairns, which could amount to up to 100 millimetres, but considering the majority of the rainfall on the backside of this weather event here, so from Sunday afternoon onwards, will be coming around from the southeast, and we're expecting showers. The Yarrabah Peninsula will block Cairns and shelter it from getting the significant rainfall accumulations that other locations will receive, and as such, Cairns can only expect about 150 to 250 millimetres on the forecast. Still some respectable and much needed rainfall for the Cairns area, but it goes to show you how much Cairns depends on what the wind direction is because of their protected location here for the rainfall to really eventuate there, and considering the winds will not be doing a good job in protecting Cairns from rainfall through Saturday and Sunday, that's when the majority of the rainfall is expected. But beyond that, even in stark contrast to what other locations around the Daintree and further down the Cassowary coast can expect through the early parts of next week and into the later parts of next week, the rainfall in Cairns will be marginal in comparison to that. The real rainfall will be piping up from Innisfail and heading for locations further south. So Innisfail, Tully, South Mission Beach, rainfall accumulations anywhere between that 300 to 700 millimetre mark can be expected. The rainfall will be slightly lighter as you get further inland as well. You can actually see the Atherton table, and it's really not expecting anything crazy in the way of rainfall out there. But if we check back in with another forecast model, you can see between the GFS and the SMLF, the congruency there is between 100 out to about 200 millimetres for both Mareeba, Atherton and Ravenshoe in this forecast period. The rainfall accumulations, there'll be nothing in comparison to those along the coastline though. Like I said, between 300 and 700 millimetres. It's a little bit too early to put an exact number on it right now. Hingebrook Island, Cardwell and Ingham can expect anywhere between 500 and 600 millimetres of rainfall. There looks to be a little bit more precision there in the rainfall forecast, at least with what we can expect there. Significant accumulations also expected around Palm Island, which could amount up to about 700 millimetres as well. Townsville is a little bit of a wild card at this time, just considering that they do have that notorious rain dome, and the fact that the axis, generally speaking, almost always overestimates the rainfall for Townsville, so it can be an unreliable forecast model to use. Between other forecast models though, Townsville actually looking at anywhere between 150 and 250 millimetres of rainfall. In fact, it could be slightly heavier than the GFS, actually calling for up to about 300 millimetres around Townsville, and considering that the axis forecast model is actually calling for about 400 millimetres, so it's anywhere between 200 out to about 400 millimetres between their major forecast models, which gives me great confidence in saying that Townsville is actually expecting some pretty significant rainfall accumulations here right after that dreadful rainfall event. But it looks like all of those rivers and those dams have begun to recover from this rainfall here. But I still reckon once we start pushing around that 300 to 400 millimetre mark, which could actually be heavier as you get out towards the Ross Dam area, the rainfall will actually begin to be quite problematic beyond about 300 to 400 millimetres. So again, that's probably not the best news that Townsville wanted to hear at this point. We will keep a very close eye on Townsville, and considering the majority of the rainfall is actually expected later on into the forecast period, you can see here a lot of the rainfall will fall through this weekend, but then there'll be those top-up falls that we're expecting later on into the forecast period through Thursday and Friday next week. So we will keep an eye on the Townsville forecast at this point, but again, I don't think there's any need to be panicking or worrying if you do live in the Townsville area, but certainly it is time to begin paying close attention to the weather forecast this time. Ayr and Bowen and those locations between Townsville right down to the Whitsundays along the coastline, anywhere between 150 and 300 millimetres can be expected. Heavier falls expected the further north and the further exposed you are in those locations. The Whitsundays, anywhere between 100 out to about 150 millimetres can be expected along the coastline. Rainfall accumulations up to about 250 millimetres if possible, with heavier falls expected around the Proserpine area area from showers that could get themselves jammed up into the mountainous areas around Proserpine, and as such rainfall accumulations are up to about 350 millimetres can be expected over the next 10 days. I do hope that's answered everybody's questions up in far north Queensland on the rainfall event. I think today and tomorrow there's no need to be panicking or no need to be worrying about the rainfall, and especially for far north Queensland's Cass-Free Coast through this weekend, the rainfall is not going to be problematic at all. You guys are built for that type of stuff, so there is no need to panic. But again, this weekend, keep a close eye on the river levels as well. Make sure you are prepared if you live in a flood-prone location, and stay very vigilant as well. And remember, if it is flooded, forget it. It is not worth your time or your life to save stuff that is flooded, because again, floodwaters in an event like this, where we're talking about heavy showers and rain bands streaming ashore, floodwaters will very rapidly rise, and they will catch a lot of people off guard. But anyways, that does us for far north Queensland. I think this leads us nicely on into the next part of the video, which is the tropical low discussion in the Gulf of Carpentaria. And again, that does have a pretty major role in what the rainfall and what the situation is going to be up in far north Queensland as well. So it is worth taking another look at, that's for sure. You can see we're already starting to see convection and showers and thunderstorms become quite widespread across the Gulf of Carpentaria and across the top end of the Northern Territory. And whilst we don't really have organised rotation beginning to develop here, you can see some of the wind observations beginning to support the northwesterly flow that we tend to see with developing tropical lows. And whilst there really isn't any scent that we can deduce here from these wind observations and even the flow of the rainfall and the thunderstorms, certainly one is beginning to develop, that's for sure. And it looks like this low pressure system will actually begin to mature over the next couple of days. It'll be a very, very slow one to mature, and it is going to remain a very elongated low pressure system as a result of this monsoon trough here. But the general consensus is between the forecast models that we will see something begin to develop as we get out towards the later parts of this weekend and into the early parts of next week. Now, this is a GFS forecast model, which I believe does have a bit of a better grip than what the SMLF is saying at this point. You can see it does. This system really takes its time to develop. The monsoon trough, whilst it will remain active right throughout the remainder of the forecast period, I apologise for that, I just banged the desk, through Thursday and in towards Friday, you can see the monsoon trough remaining very active. It's not expected to spin out tropical low stuff until much later on into the forecast period here, and you can see that with the GFS being spitting out the tropical low much later on into the back couple of days of March here. In contrast to that, the axis is calling for the development of this tropical low, which could actually get to tropical cyclone status by the early parts of next week. To be honest, we really don't know at this point here. We don't know if it's going to get to cyclone status, and considering there is a lot of discrepancies between the forecast models at this time, I think the only thing that we can agree on right now is that something will develop into the last couple of days of March, and something is also likely to develop between Monday and about Thursday next week. But in terms of rainfall accumulations, it's kind of the only certainty that we have at this time, and considering it will develop in the southern parts of the Gulf of Carpentaria, expecting some pretty significant rainfall accumulations along the Northern Territory and the Queensland coastline of the Carpentaria as well, with falls up to about 400 millimetres expected between Borroloola and Robinson River out towards Corumba in the southeastern corner of the Gulf of Carpentaria as well. Mornington Island as well could see up to about 300 millimetres of rainfall. Good rainfall continuing across the Northern Territory as well as a result of this developing monsoon, especially later on into the forecast period between the 20th out to about the 27th of March. Rainfall accumulations across the top end of the Northern Territory could be as high as 350 up to about 500 millimetres along the coastline. So some very good news indeed for rain lovers up there. There's been a very dry monsoon, so this rainfall will be very welcome indeed. And 250 millimetres for the Darwin, like I said, in the backside of this forecast period here between the 20th out to about the 27th of March. That is certainly some good rainfall and something that they will get quite excited about, that's for sure. So those rain dances up in the Northern Territory, they have been paying off, that's for sure. It looks like we do have some good rainfall and some robust rainfall now on the forecast later on into the forecast period. Normally the 500 millimetres at this time of the year across a week-long time frame across the Northern Territory would be cause for concern, that's for sure, but it doesn't really look like it considering they have had such a dry monsoon. You can see on the drought monitoring maps here, it really is quite a sad and scary picture across parts of the Northern Territory. I'll see if I can load in a bit of a map here, and whilst there isn't any risk because the rainfall has been just enough of these locations here, in terms of soil moisture anomalies, they're actually quite low across much of the Northern Territory. They're just beginning to pick up now across parts of the Northern Territory, which is good to see, but yeah, in terms of drought monitoring right now, it is looking quite ugly across much of the Northern Territory, but later on into the forecast period, it looks like that picture becomes a lot prettier. Soil moisture values begin to rise, and that drought begins to creep further and further south into the true desert locations, which is very good news indeed for the Northern Territory. They desperately need this rainfall, that's for sure. Now, the most exciting part of this video is these WA cyclones, because for the most part, it doesn't actually look like they're going to go for the West Australian coastline, but at this time of the year, they could certainly get quite strong. Now, I'll get to the rainfall and thunderstorm mess that we're seeing across southwest Western Australia in a later part of the video, but pushing the forecast forward out to about Monday, we can start to see the monsoon trough begin to spin up some tropical lows here and there. We've got a robust tropical low expected to develop around the Cocos Keeling Islands and Christmas Island later on into the forecast period around Tuesday or Wednesday, the 18th or 19th of March, which could spin itself up to a weak tropical cyclone as it heads to the south for the West Australian coastline through the 20th out to about the 23rd of March, but ultimately doesn't make it, of course. course it doesn't, because it just gets pushed away by the trade winds at that point. So yeah, certainly some interesting stuff on the forecast. A bit of a hokey pokey tropical low expected out there, and then much later on in the forecast period, you can see that active monsoon trough beginning to develop tropical cyclones left, right, and centre. We've got that one in the Gulf of Carpentaria that the Eastern Weather and the GFS are actually really on board with, and the Eastern Weather and the GFS forecast model, actually, I mean, I'm flicking through them right now. You can see just how congruent they are, and keep in mind we're now looking 2 weeks out in the future on Thursday the 27th of March, and that's just how good forecasting has become over the last couple of months with some refinements using artificial intelligence. It's been really, really good to see. But the Eastern Weather and GFS calling for pretty much the exact same thing, which gives me great confidence in saying that we are going to be seeing tropical cyclone activity offshore from WA. I'm going to revise my initial forecast between the 23rd and the 26th of March out to about the 25th to about the 28th of March, when we're expecting tropical low/tropical cyclone development out here. You can see the GFS forecast model actually calling for it to happen a little bit earlier here, but that tropical low then spinning out, and it looks like by the looks of things heading for the WA coastline. If we did see the GFS track here, where we've got this system now heading towards the southeast and being dragged down into the West Australian coastline here, by the looks of things heading for Broome, that would be a very concerning forecast indeed. But again, we're looking way too far out into the future right now to be able to deduce exactly what is expected from these forecast models. It's just that we've got tropical cyclones now in the forecast, and the chances of tropical cyclones developing offshore from Western Australia after the 20th of March is now looking pretty high. In fact, after the 25th of March, it's now looking pretty high. In terms of land impacts, like I said, it's far too early to tell, and I also want people to take these forecasts that they are seeing with a very, very heavy pinch of salt at this time. In fact, take it with a shovel load of salt, because there's a lot of stuff going around on Facebook right now in terms of definitives and exact in what we're expecting with these tropical cyclones. The forecast models are still actually flip-flopping with each other, so it is still, like I said, far too early to be able to tell for sure what we're currently expecting here. But in terms of tropical cyclone activity, it is now looking exceedingly likely into the last couple of days of March, and the last week of March actually, that we'll see some tropical cyclone activity offshore from Western Australia, and some strong tropical cyclone activity is expected at that. Now, if these cyclones, and it's not when, it's an if right now, if these cyclones do go over the West Australian coastline, and they are of a significant magnitude that I would consider worth it enough to chase, I'd certainly be racing up there, that's for sure. So again, I would just like to throw that out there. If you haven't already, subscribe, because there will be some chasing footage if these tropical cyclones do materialize as the forecast models are suggesting. And if they do go for the West Australian coastline, I will certainly be up there chasing them, that's for sure. Anyways, to round out this video, I would just like to talk about the showery stuff that's occurring across the southwest of Western Australia. It's a very complex low pressure system with a strong trough extending across Western Australia right now, right down into the deeps of the Great Australian Bight, extending north through the Goldfields and then up through the Gascoyne and the Pilbara, and that's connecting to a low pressure system, a very weak low pressure system, which is firing up some showers and thunderstorms offshore from the Pilbara coastline here. And you can see on the radar and satellite imagery plenty of rainfall now streaming ashore, and normally when we see rainfall like this, it's from a form called sea clutter, which is a malfunction of the radar systems up there, but this time it's real rainfall and some heavier stuff as well. We've actually seen some good rainfall accumulations overnight in this area, or this neck of the woods up in Western Australia, and we're expecting some good rainfall accumulations to continue throughout the remainder of today as well. In fact, you can see rainfall accumulations over the next 48 hours rather, expected to be up to about 50 millimeters around the Mount Augustus and the Lyndon area, and then extending down towards Gascoyne Junction. Rainfall accumulations anywhere between 0 out to about 25 millimeters can be expected. Now, considering we're seeing this rainfall from showers and thunderstorms, it is going to be very hit and miss. It's going to be very hokey pokey, that's for sure. We will be seeing some locations cop it and some locations completely miss out. So do not get your hopes up to take all of the showers as they come, because it is just too early to tell right now. We're not going to be able to tell exactly how much rainfall is expected for what locations. It's just not the type of rainfall that we can do that. Down into the Goldfields, widespread falls between 25 and 50 millimeters can be expected, especially throughout the remainder of today, as well as we get showers and thunderstorms throughout the remainder of today, later on into tonight, into early tomorrow morning as well. So some widespread falls expected down there. We could be seeing falls around the Norseman areas, heavy as about 70 or 80 millimeters, which would be some very good news for those locations, that's for sure. Get those dams and those rivers topped up ahead of the planting season. I think that's a little bit too far out for the planting areas, but you know what I mean. It'd make for a very good start of the wildflower season, that's for sure. And then across the southwest corner of Western Australia, anywhere between 10 and 50 millimeters can be expected, with falls becoming a lot more hit and miss the further north you get out, around the Beverley and the York areas, when the falls begin to really fall off, and we could be seeing falls anywhere between the 0 to 25 millimeter mark. For the Perth metro area, whilst you can expect some showers and thunderstorms throughout the remainder of today, being pushed through by a cold front that we can see developing offshore here, and showers and thunderstorms can be expected throughout the late morning and into the early afternoon hours into the Perth metro area, with a few thunderstorms also possible across the eastern suburbs into the late afternoon and the early evening hours. I don't think the rainfall in Perth will be anything too grand, only about 5 to 10 millimeters is expected, and it is still quite hit and miss as well, with some suburbs expecting to receive some significant accumulations up to about that 25mm mark, and others not expecting any rainfall as well. So in the Perth metro area, don't get your hopes up too far right now. And you can see, even though this rainfall is now beginning, or this cloud activity is beginning to get itself over into the radar coverage right now, nothing is really developing in it, which does kind of concern me in terms of the fact that this rainfall event might be a complete fizzer, which it is actually very likely to be, just considering the nature of this stuff. But oh my goodness, this video has ran for a long time. I do apologise for that. There's not an awful lot to be talking about around the wide Australian world of weather at this point. The remnants of Cyclone Alfred are completely dead as well. Might I just add that? I'm trying to steer away from that, considering I could talk about the impacts for a very long time, that's for sure. But anyways, that is all that I have time for today. A special shout out, of course, the channel sponsors. The list keeps growing and growing and growing, and I could not be more thankful. If you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing as well. Plenty more coverage to come on tropical weather events throughout the remainder of the wet season. Then we're going to swing things into the winter focus as well, and plenty of stuff as well to come through the winter season. So yeah, very good time to subscribe, that's for sure. But that is all from me today, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.